Hey everyone, welcome to another responsive design video. In previous videos, we built a simple web page that's responsive. And what we're doing is we're starting from just the base HTML, working our way up piece by piece, adding the CSS to make a fully responsive web page. So far, what we have is something that looks like this. It's not terribly attractive right now. We haven't done really any styles in terms of colors and typography and fonts and any of that kind of stuff yet. We just have the bare bones HTML and a little bit of CSS. We've got the CSS set up so that it responds at two different breakpoints, one at 48 or rem and one at 64 rem. So that at the widest, it looks like this, a two-column layout. And then it breaks at 768 or 48 rem to be a full one column layout. And then it goes down from there. Okay. So there we have it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add Flexbox to a few things, and we're going to adjust the widths on some things. Because it doesn't look great at full screen. Notice that this line is way too long. These lines are a little bit too long, probably longer than we want them to look, and we can constrain those things. Okay? The other thing that we wanted to do was set it up such that on the wider screens, the image with its caption is sitting to the left of this text in the feature. And at wider screens, we have the links horizontal instead of vertical. And we're going to do that through Flexbox. So let's get started. First thing I want to do is address the navigation and the feature. All right, so by default, our default style, we're doing mobile first, remember? So our default style is what it's going to look like when it's at its narrowest. Default for both the feature and for the nav should just be a vertical stack. So really nothing is going to change for the nav and for the feature. I want it to look pretty much exactly the same. But when I break right here, instead of being a vertical stack here and a vertical stack here, I want them to go horizontal. So that implies that we are not going to do anything with the default styles for the feature or the nav in terms of Flexbox, but we're going to flex it right here at this breakpoint. So the media query here is a min width of 48 rem. That means that anything larger than 48 rem is going to have this style applied. So what I want to do is I want to first address the nav, and I want to get it horizontal when I get larger than this. If I take a look at my nav, my structure is nav, ul, li. And this is important when we're dealing with Flex, because think back to anything that we've done with Flex before. It's all about a parent-child relationship. You've got the parent where you display Flex, and that's going to organize how the children are displayed in the browser. So in this case, ul is what needs to be flexed. So all uls that exist in nav will get flexed. I'm going to go to my style sheet and add a new style rule under the 48 min width media query. I'll go nav ul. So that means all uls that exist in the nav. There's only one of them. I'm going to display flex. Let's look at it in the browser and see if it responded. All right, so I am above my 764 breakpoint, and you can see that it's horizontal and it's sitting on the left side. And you can see when I get below the 768, it breaks to vertical. That's what I wanted to see happen. Now, the thing that I want to see also is when I break above 768 is I want my nav to be pushed to the center. I want all of those links to go into the center of the page instead of sitting to the left. Okay? That can be done with Flex. That's through justify content. Justify content. And I'll try center and see how that looks. And there we go. Now it's right in the center. I also think it looks kind of weird to have the logo over here on the left side. I could move that to the center. Let's give that a try. The way that I might handle this is also through flex. Flex is often done with multiple items, like you display flex on a parent and align all of the other items, but you can also do it with just one item. I can flex my header and then have my image go into the center. So let's try that. Now I want this to be a default. I want it to go into the center at the small and the large, and then go to the left at the largest. So if that's going to be my default, here in my default styles, in other words, not inside one of the media queries, so these are my media queries, these are my breakpoints, the default header is going to be display flex. If I look at this in the browser, it's not going to really look any different because it's still going to be to the left side. It's flexed, but I haven't justified it yet. I could go flex end and push it to the right side. I could go center or flex left. Default is flex left. Or flex start, not flex left. So now I need to justify content. And I'm going to go center in the browser and see how that looks. Okay, on medium size, you can see it's centered. Small size, it's still centered. And large size, it's still centered. Well, on large size, I want it to go back over to flex start. That means I have to go to one of my breakpoints. Large size is not min width of 48 rem. Large size is min width of 64 rem. The only thing I have to do with that is make a style rule for header and change how justify content is working. Because it'll stay flexed. I just want to change it to flex start. Make sure that's spelled correctly. Yes, flex start. And there we go. At our widest, it's over to the left side because it's flex start. When I get below that widest breakpoint, this is my 64 rem breakpoint, it goes to the center. And it stays in the center for the smallest. I think that looks pretty good. Awesome. Now, the other thing that I wanted to see was I wanted my links to go to the right side at our widest breakpoint. Okay? So I'm going to go to my CSS, go to the min width 64 rem. That is my breakpoint for the large screens. And I want to go nav, ul, justify content, flex end. And that's going to put it on the right side. So my breakpoint here, my media query for 64 rem, is going to get nav, ul, justify content, flex end. Check it and see. There we go. On the largest size screens, it's going over to the right. Cool. That's looking the way I want it. So now the organization of my header and my nav are doing what they're supposed to do. Let's handle the feature. The way I want my feature to behave is I want it at the medium and large size to have the text and the image sitting side by side, and at the smallest to be a vertical stack. That implies flex. So look at my HTML and analyze the structure. Here is my feature. It's a section called feature. It's a class feature. It's got a figure as a child. It's got a div as a child. And I wanted my figure and this text div to behave as whole units. I want the figure to sit to the left of all the text. That implies this is going to be the flex parent and these are going to be the flexed children. So section class feature is where I'm going to do display flex. This is something that I only want to happen on medium size and large size. So I don't need to put display flex on the default style. I want to do it on the media query for 48 rem and above. So min width, 48 rem. I'm going to choose feature. I'll go display flex. Save it, check it, and there we go. We are at the large size right now. I'm at 1088, so that's above 1024. There's my medium size breakpoint, below 1024 and above 768. It's still side by side. I get down below 768 and becomes a vertical stack. That looks great. Not everything is exactly the way I want it, but it's looking pretty good. So it's responding the way I want to for the header, the nav, and the feature. All right, let's do one more thing. I want to handle the overall width of the page, and I also want to handle the width of those two columns. Let's think back to some of the typography stuff that I talked about in previous videos. Line lengths should be comfortable reading lengths, and a lot of people who study typography and who study things like reading and reading disabilities and things like that believe that a comfortable line length to read is anywhere between about 40 to 45 characters at a minimum and about 75 characters length as a maximum. If it goes below 45, it's too short. If it goes above 75, it's too long, and people have trouble scanning from line to line or lose track in a line of text, so it becomes harder to read. So let's ensure that our two columns never get above a maximum of 75 characters long. So as a default, I want to make sure that on all sizes, it never gets longer than 75 characters. So that's going to be our main content and our sign content. And I'm going to add max width. Max width will ensure that it never gets larger than this. So if I go 75 CH, it'll make sure the main content never gets wider than 75 CH. I'm going to do the same thing with the side content. The main content, side content now have a max width of 75 CH. Let's check it in the browser. And you can see that they changed size just a little bit. Now, oh, that doesn't look anything the way I want it to. You can see that these columns are not going to be any wider than 75 characters. They can't get any bigger. And because they couldn't get any bigger, they didn't stretch to fill up the space. We've got this huge, unsightly gap here. So how do we fix that? Well, there are a lot of ways to handle this, but one of the easiest ways to handle this is ensure that our grid container never gets so wide that our design breaks. This is an example of our design breaking. When I say that a design breaks, it means that it no longer looks good. It's broken. So I want to ensure that this whole entire page doesn't get wider than, say, well, I'm not going to inspect element. I'm just going to manually drag it. See how as we make the screen narrower and narrower, it starts to come together? We don't want to get it any wider than, say, right about here. Okay? Let's check that in our debug mode here with inspect element. And I can't make it really, I can go like this, squish that down. So when I'm at like 1241, that's getting to the point where I'm getting the gap in between these to be a little bit wide. I think that's okay right now, but I don't want it any wider than that. Okay? So 1241 divided by 16. That gives us about 77 So I think the overall width of the page shouldn't get any wider than, say, 75 I think that'll be a comfortable maximum width for the overall page. That'll ensure that it never gets wider than this gap here, and that'll handle my two columns well. Okay, so let's take a look at the HTML and see how we handle that. In the past, when we want to constrain the overall size of our page, we've used the wrapper. We usually make something called page wrapper, content wrapper, wrapper, or something like that, and we set a maximum width on it. Okay, so let's try that. In this case, if we look at my HTML, my wrapper is called grid container. So div class grid container is containing all of my content. It's what sets up the grid. And if I set a max width on that and constrain the overall width, we can make sure that it never exceeds that point where those columns get too far apart and create that unsightly gap. So let's go to the CSS. And as a default style, so at all sizes, at all breakpoints, I never want it to get wider than a max width of, what did I say, 75 So I will set max width to 75 For rem, let's do relative m's here. There we go. And that took away that little bit of a gap there. Okay, let's see what it looks like at 77 rem. There's a little bit of a gap there. I'm going to hide this. That gap stays at a decent size, and it's never going to get bigger than that. I'm going to go to 75 rem and see how it looks. And it brings it together so that they're nice and tight. Let's see what it looks like at 64 rem. That's, you know, a little bit narrow. On wider screens, I think we can use up more of the real estate. So I think 75 rem was comfortable. All right, this looks pretty good. You can see that it's getting a little bit wider over here. I've got my column extending over to here. And as I make it smaller, it's never going to get wider than this. Great. So that looks good. Now, I have the issue of, now that I've constrained the maximum width of my page, I've got all this wasted space on the right. I don't like that. I want my whole page to sit in the center instead of all the way to the left. So if we think about how we've done this in the past, we've taken a container, and as long as you apply a width to it, a defined width to it, if you set the margins on left and right to auto, it'll automatically set the margins equal widths, thereby centering it. This is an old trick that goes way back to the first videos in all the videos I've made for the HTML and CSS series. And it's pretty simple. Margin, 0 top and bottom, auto left and right. That'll set left and right to automatic, so they're equal, thereby centering it, and the top and bottom to 0. And there you go, you've got it right in the center. Now let's see what this looks like with a background color. I'm going to put a background color in the wrapper and then a background color in the body, just so we can get some contrast and we can better see, you know, the width of this page and see if the width looks right for us. So I'll go background color here. Set it to ivory. And then I'm going to set a background color on the body. Select body. Set the background color. I'm just going to set it to black, so that the whole web page will look black background, and then my grid will look ivory. There we go. This is looking pretty good. It's starting to come together. Clearly, there's a lot of style left that I need to do on this, but it's starting to work. I've got a maximum width here so that I don't get that unsightly column gap. I've got it so that it responds to different breakpoints at below 1024 or below 64M and below 768, okay? So it's starting to come together. There's still quite a bit more work to do. We're gonna handle styling the images to be responsive in a future video, and then we're gonna do all the typography in another video. And when we're done with all these videos, it should look really good as a whole. Thanks for watching.